Yeah, so
Brilliant.
today on the podcast we have Alyssa Lagonia. She played with me for a little bit in Cyprus when I was playing Champions League shortly after college. You've been nearly everywhere, I feel like. You've played in England, Switzerland, Italy, Cyprus, and now you're in Switzerland, right? Full time
Back in
again?
Switzerland, yeah.
Yeah, and but you're from Canada, so not too
That's
far from
right.
us here in the States. And been playing for quite a bit, and also have done some other work stuff while in your career, and now you're back, finish your master's and playing again. I guess to start, just because we're in the States, what's your experience been now with COVID? How is it over there? What have you been up to? Are you guys quarantined, or what's the situation in
Yeah.
Switzerland?
Yeah, so actually my current situation is a little more complex than one might think. So I live in France,
Okay.
on the border to Switzerland, because my club put me up in this apartment here when I first arrived. It's easier, it's cheaper, it's more convenient for them and for me. So I live in France, just across the border, but France has much larger restrictions and regulations in place due to COVID than Switzerland does. In Switzerland, the general public tend to follow rules and abide by the guidelines given by the government, whereas maybe in France it's not quite the same. So they've put those measures in place. So I feel quite isolated out here. On my own. There's no other teammates around me or friends that I know in the area, and I can't cross the border. So it makes it quite limiting. However, I have a full-time job also with UEFA. So after I graduated, I came here first to play for Servette in Geneva. I thought that it was a good opportunity for me to kind of come out of the Masters thinking that I wanted to play again, but I also wanted to advance my off-field career and use what I just learned in my Masters as well. So I thought Geneva was a great place to kind of start looking for opportunities off the field as well. And the club was a great way for me to get in the area and get in the door and feel comfortable and also get to play again, because I missed that for the year that I was studying. And so, shortly after I arrived, I applied for this position at UEFA, and I got the job. So I work in women's football as the assistant to the unit. And I work full time at home from home on this. So it keeps me quite busy, plus working out every day and trying to keep up with family and friends. I mean, I find my days passing quite quickly, which is great, but quite a complicated situation.
Yeah. So let's go back a little just to give people more context
Sure.
as to your journey. So you grew up in Canada, went to school in Canada. You had, you even played in the national team with Canada for a bit. And then once you could become a professional, you decided to go overseas, which I think a lot of people in the States don't realize that majority of girls don't actually play in the NWSL. They end up going overseas to some other country.
Exactly, yeah.
Kind of talk about that transition, and was that challenging at first, being so young and having, I think, what was it, England your first spot, or
Yeah.
just kind of having to be by yourself, you kind of leave your home, which is far away, and have to kind of immerse yourself. England, at least they speak the language, so it was a little bit easier maybe, but how was that first experience going overseas?
Yeah, exactly. England was a strategic choice in that regard. I wanted, so in university, one of the reasons why I stayed in Canada and played was because my coach was very well known in our community. He was also an agent for a lot of men. And he always said, come play for me, and afterwards, I'll help you get overseas. I'll help you get a professional career in this. And, you never know where you could go afterwards. So that always appealed to me, and I took him up on his offer come my senior year. And so we worked on, my game tape, and I got an Italian passport in the meantime due to my
Helpful.
Family background, which helps a lot. So those who are looking to go to Europe, I mean, if you can reach back into your family history in any way and get a European passport. It helps a lot. But yeah, so we spoke to different clubs in England, and I guess it started as a trial. So we spoke to them via Skype one day in the office of my coach. We spoke about a very limited amount of things and items. I said, yeah, I'm going to come for a week. I'll try out and see what happens. I packed a bag for a week and stayed for a year. They liked me. I stayed in a hotel though. So my experience in England wasn't as glamorous as one might think. So I stayed in a hotel, which was about half an hour from where we were training, half an hour from the city that I was in. I was in Doncaster, playing for Doncaster Bells. So it's a northern town, not maybe the nicest of places. I was put kind of in the middle of nowhere with a few other foreign girls as in, you know, from maybe Ireland or also another Canadian. So we were kind of stuck out there. I had one meal a day paid by the club at the hotel, but the other two meals I had to fend for myself. But I didn't have a kitchen in my room, so I ended up boiling eggs in my tea kettle and getting a mini fridge for some yogurt and fruits and whatnot.
I'm glad we had the same experience, because that was my experience in Norway. So
exactly.
Yeah.
It was certainly not, you know, what you think when you think of, you know, professional footballer's life. I had to get 2 other jobs. So, I mean, the pay wasn't enough to survive out there. So I was working as a coach in schools alongside one of my coaches. And I was also a beer and shot girl in a nightclub or a classic
grind,
cocktail
man.
bar. Yeah. But I mean, that was a great experience because that was my outlet. That was my way to meet new friends, new people outside of the football world. I was able to connect and kind of find a bit of a social life that way, not in a negative way, but a very positive way. And I was able to find a little bit more sanity in my life out there. Yeah, so after that I experienced, I kind of learned everything that I didn't want in a club and in an experience in my professional footballing career. So
Right.
I learned from it, which was great.
Yeah. So I think you bring up a really good point about, you know, I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm going to play in Germany or England, and, you know, right away you think of like London and the night scene or like all the big tourist spots. And oftentimes many of us are playing in very small cities that maybe don't have many people or, you know, don't speak the language and whatnot. So talk about kind of, I know just from my experience with you that you ended up going to England and then you went to Switzerland and had time in Italy as well. And I think what's so fascinating about you is that you played, but you were so good at immersing yourself to kind of have, because, you know, soccer can become so consuming if that's all you do, like anything else in your life. And you speak both Italian and German, right? Am I right?
Correct.
And so you really made, I mean, again, you made it kind of a culture experience as well as immersing yourself in other activities outside of just the sport. What kind of gave you the courage to do that, one? And also just like, what's your advice for people that kind of are in these situations or thinking about it and need help kind of finding the little things that kind of make your experience much better in a smaller place?
I 100% agree with that. I think that immersing yourself or trying to integrate yourself into the culture around you is the best way to make your experiences as fulfilled as possible. So when I moved from, I think I kind of learned a little bit about that when I had that bartending job in England. It was about halfway through my experience there, and I realized, you know, okay, this helps. I need to find ways to connect with the community outside of football and make friends outside of this world. So I moved to Italy next, and I decided I needed to learn the language. And so I went to school 3 times a week in far away school on my own every day to learn the language. And then we kind of found some friends through one of my teammates who was dating a guy who knew a guy. And then these people this group ended up being some of our closest friends. We still keep in touch today. And that really helped, again, from the lifestyle and the experience. So what I try to do when I move to all these different places is not only get to play great football, but try and learn as much as I can. So learn a language, learn the culture, meet new people. And that really, I think it really makes everything that much better and that much more worthwhile. Right now, actually, I tend to struggle a little bit in learning French. So everything around me is French, and I don't have necessarily the time now to really learn the language because of my other job. So my job is in English, but my teammates and everything to do with my team is all in French. So I find that there's quite that disconnect right now. And although I'm trying to close this gap, it's definitely I definitely feel the barrier that is created because of the language, one, and two, it's a different kind of scene where the girls are more local. It's less of an international scene compared to some of the other clubs that I've played for. So they all have their own separate lives, their own families and friends and whatnot. So it's not as much of like a team that's, united in that sense. We're very much a cohesive unit, and we have a lot of fun together, but at the same time, we all have different lives. Whereas some of the teams I've played for, we come from all over the place. We end up living in the same areas, and so that kind of helps in terms of integrating and making friends that way.
Yeah, I feel like people also, the assumption is always, English is the universal language, but I was shocked as well. You go to some of these teams, you may be the only person that speaks English beyond the manager, the coach, or whoever. And you can get through that through soccer, I think, in certain ways, but it can definitely be hard in the social life when you're kind of trying to be a part of the group, but also not really understanding what's going on. And I know for myself, that's actually something on my quarantine bucket list. I want to get back into Greek and really learn it and not just understand parts of it. And I think it's hard sometimes because, like, I don't know why, but sometimes the mentality for me is like, oh, I'm too old, like I can't do it. But then I think of someone like you, and I'm like, you really immerse yourself in something and push yourself to speak. You can do it. But you've had so much success. You've won a bunch of championships, played in the Women's Champions League and things of that matter. So you have a lot of experience from the international side. What made you want to pursue this FIFA Masters, which, I actually did a lot of reading after. It sounds like an incredible program where you get to kind of get this degree from 3 different universities around Europe. And obviously it's given you a nice opportunity with UEFA. What made you pivot and also realize that you didn't have to necessarily give up your passion through the process? I mean, obviously you had to take a break, but what kind of motivated you to try to do that? And then what gave you the courage to say, okay, I've done this, but I still want to pursue my passion after the fact?
Yeah. So I learned about this program maybe 5 years ago when I was in Switzerland. I kind of bumped into someone. It just kind of happened by chance. And when this person explained it to me, I fell in love instantly. I thought, wow, what a great program. One day, that's what I'm going to do. Like, if I have to retire from football at some point in my career, I'm going to do it by doing something that can help me pivot, like you said, into sport, but in an off-field type of position or career path. And I always thought that this would be the perfect opportunity for me. I loved it because, like you said, you learn from 3 different universities in 3 different parts of Europe. So we go from England to Italy to Switzerland, kind of the same path that my football has taken me on. And so at the time, I'm getting older, and I was playing in Cyprus. We just finished Champions League. We just got kicked out of Champions League. And
Rough one.
And
Lidköping.
exactly. Swedish champs kicked us out, and we were starting our season in Cyprus, and we were killing every game, and we were just destroying these like 15-year-old girls. And I was just saying to myself, what am I doing now? Okay, I'm in Cyprus, I'm having a great time, I'm living near the beach. I'm not learning a language because there's no way I'm going to try and grasp Greek. Like, there's no way. And everyone in Cyprus speaks English. So I was like, there's no way I'm doing the language thing. And so I decided maybe I could do some kind of master's. And I was actually looking into an online master in Cyprus. And then I got in, I applied, I got in, I started the first week of class, and I realized this is not what I want to do. I dropped out immediately, and I was just like, no, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it right. I want to do something that really I'm passionate about. And I applied for the FIFA Master, and I said, if I get in, great, I'll retire and I'll pursue it. If I don't get in, then no big deal. I'll keep playing and see what happens next. Find another team, whatever. But it ended up that I got in. So yeah, I went for the plunge and dove right in.
And what made you want to play after? Because I guess your plan was to retire, but now obviously you're still playing. So
yeah, so I think, well, in the master, you are split into groups to work on your final thesis that you do throughout the whole year. And our group decided to do ours on the professionalization of women's football. And obviously over the last year, women's football is just on this like amazing trajectory forward. You know, you're seeing all sorts of records broken in attendances, and you know, we were building up to the World Cup, and you know, it was a very exciting time. And after doing so much research on the topic, and you know, playing with the guys in the master, you know, we would play a couple times a week. I'd play with the boys, and you know, I was killing them, and I was like, I miss this. Like, I miss a competitive atmosphere. I miss, you know, that like sense of purpose and that sense of, you know, team unity and like achieving this goal together. And I thought that there was still opportunity for me. I was still healthy and fresh and willing, and I missed it. And so at the same time, I have to be honest, because I was also looking for jobs during the master, and I wasn't finding anything. I wasn't finding anything I liked, or I wasn't maybe secure in my actual work history and my resume. My resume is great in the football world. It's got a lot of clubs that I've played for, you know, it's impressive in that sense. But when it comes to actual jobs and actual work, I don't have any experience. So it was hard for me to see how I could transition and see how like this could be. And I think I had some doubts and lost some confidence there, especially around such an esteemed group with, you know, everyone in the master has tons of experience. They're from all over the world, you know, these amazing people that I'm surrounded by. And I think I kind of, I was a little bit hard on myself, I think. And I knew what I knew. I know football, it's what I know. It's what's gotten me where I've been in my life. So it was kind of the easy option. I thought it was how I could help myself transition in a sense as well. Like, I wanted to be able to feel comfortable and confident, but then also able to challenge myself. So yeah, I went for Geneva, I went for Servette. It was an easier option in the sense that, you know, Switzerland's a great league, but it's maybe not the most competitive. It's a semi-professional team, so we only train in the evenings and play on the weekends. So I think, yeah, I missed it. I definitely missed playing. but it's also, you know, I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated, and it was something that was just sitting there for me as an opportunity. So I wanted to take it, and it ended up being the best decision ever, because it got me also to this job in UEFA, and we've actually qualified for Champions League due to these Corona restrictions. Our league was canceled a couple days ago. So we're not going to finish the season, but we finished first. We were on top of the table. So we will be going to play in the Champions League next season. So there's
that's really exciting.
Yeah, so there's a lot of positives and silver linings. So hopefully, it all continues to work out.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, you bring up a point about, for me, what it sounds like is like mentality. I think, unfortunately, just because of history and barriers, you know, we don't have these millions of dollars that fund our lives and can set us up for years beyond sport. So I feel like many of us are constantly always considering what's next. I know for myself, I almost wish I had gone to Europe a little later in my life, because I think if I would be playing now, I could have handled the situation much better and immersed myself more. And I felt like I was too young to be far away like that, in my experience. But I think also it's like, because that's all you know, it's very hard to transition out and have confidence. And I know for me, that's been something challenging, is like going back to school or getting my first job out of it. It was like kind of constantly having to prove to myself that I could do it, because I knew I could play soccer. You don't get to that level if you can't. But I guess talk a little bit about like how you've kind of kept a positive mentality through all of it, because obviously, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of, unless you have the funding, which is great, but I think oftentimes people don't have the time to kind of sit. And like you said, right, like things were not necessarily looking positive right away. And you need money to survive. So sometimes it is easier to kind of sit put, play a little, and see what happens. So just talk about mentality a little bit, because I feel like that's more or less what I'm hearing from you, is just like kind of ebbs and flows with that, but kind of keeping a narrow-minded approach in terms of like, something will happen. I just have to stay positive through the process.
Yeah, for sure. I think my whole career I've been quite positive and just, you know, take it as it comes. Opportunities will arise. Just be patient. You know, things will move. I mean, in this world, especially in between teams, in between seasons, as you're approaching maybe April, May, June, this is a time when your one-year contract, usually all of us have one-year contracts, they start to expire, and you're thinking, okay, what's next? What do I do? Do I stay here, or do I try and find something else? Do I get an agent, or do I get a new agent? Do I keep my current agent? Like, what's happening in your head? How does this work? You know, there's so much turnover in this industry, this women's football industry, because of, you know, limits on what we actually get in terms of contracts, in terms of money, in terms of whatever. So you know, because you're not getting so much, you don't want to commit yourself so long. So again, these kinds of times of the year are always quite stressful. And I think I just try and be as patient as I possibly can, because something will happen. Something does come up. And in university, it was no different. I was coming to about this point because the season ended, or graduation happened in July, and come April, May, I'm thinking, shoot, what's next? Like, what? Like, really?
That's me currently. Jobless and graduating in 4 weeks.
What am I gonna do?
What am I gonna do?
And
with a pandemic.
COVID-19.
Yeah, I'm like, pandemic, living at home. It's just like a dream over here. But anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Mean, it's kind of a dream.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Sorry to butt in, but it's funny. I keep talking to some of my classmates, and they're like, you know, it's kind of like there's less pressure, because if you find a job, it's almost like hitting the jackpot. Like, it's just not supposed to happen. So where like before, when there was so many jobs, everyone was like, your confidence starts to get knocked when you get like those rejection letters, and you're like, oh gosh, like, is my resume good enough? Whatnot. But Yeah, it's just an interesting time. And I
That's
guess
true.
it's
It's
nice that
true.
you can work remotely though. I mean, I'm sure it's isolating. And actually, on the topic of isolation, um talk a bit about that as well, because I think you've been good at, with languages and stuff of that matter, being able to kind of escape that in a way. But I think what many don't know is, playing overseas, because there is barriers to language and you're not in a overpopulated area oftentimes, isolation is oftentimes a huge reason why people stop playing, because
Mm.
you're just used to going from like your family environment. So how have you managed that over time? I mean, you've been in so many different environments, I'm sure some better than others, but how have you kind of managed keeping yourself away from feeling like you're alone all the time, I guess? It's a simple way of saying it.
Um, that has really never occurred to me until this pandemic, or well,
Yeah.
until moving to France. I mean, so over my career, I mean, maybe in England when I started off, but again, I had a few close teammates who also lived in the same area, and as I moved through my life and my career, I always had close teammates who lived close to me. So they became best friends, and that always helped, and that always distracted me from, missing the family or missing my home or missing, friends from back home. So these kind of relationships always were my kind of saving grace and my second families. And it evolves and it grows from there, and you learn so much from these new people. And I love to stay open about meeting people and learning their ways and learning their cultures and this kind of stuff. So that's always been awesome. But let me tell you, this pandemic has really done a number on my this lonely feeling. It's just it's quite powerful, and it takes a lot of mental strength and talking to those friends now via Skype or or whatever. Like you really need to learn to communicate and reach out and express your true feelings and what you're going through, because believe it or not, everyone's going through the same
I
thing.
know.
And it's great to be able to connect that way, and on an even higher level than you would maybe if you're with someone in real life, in person, face to face. So definitely the last 2 months I've hit some major
Well,
lows.
yeah.
Major lows, and
Are you
kind of
alone in that?
I'm completely
Completely
alone. Yeah,
alone. Yeah.
completely alone. So yeah, definitely learned a lot about myself, and I think I'm coming out on top now. I can see the light. I can see more of how I've grown over the last 2 months, but it's just not been easy. Not been easy.
Yeah. I think I got on a Zoom chat with a couple of my close friends yesterday, and I hadn't done it in a while. And I don't know, I think when you're around your family, you all know it's kind of shitty, like this whole situation. And then when you talk to others and you're like, okay, everybody is feeling like this. Makes you, I
Yeah.
don't know if it makes you feel better, but you're kind of like, okay, I don't feel like I'm the only one in this.
Yeah.
I guess just something else I'd love to talk about is, taking your experience. You've played all over Europe. You've done this FIFA program. You work for UEFA. Where do you see women's soccer going, I guess, globally? Because I know for us, we're fighting for a lot of things here in the US. And I think generally a lot of Europeans actually probably would say that the US is ahead of the game. I don't think people realize that a lot of countries in Europe were far, far behind, unfortunately. I mean, it sounds like things are so positive. So kind of where do you see the transition, and where do you hope to kind of see women's soccer go in the next 2 to 3 years, I guess?
Yeah, I definitely think that the States are pioneers for the women's game, 100%. Everything that the Americans do, the rest of the world tends to follow behind. You guys are fighting for, equal pay. And although you hit a little road bump recently,
Yeah,
it's
unfortunately.
still a fight that empowers and inspires the rest of the world. So I think that the Americans are always very highly recognized and respected in this industry, that's for sure, at least for me. But in terms of where women's football is going, after the last few years that we've had, you know, everyone's hopes are so high, you know, it's turning into a commercial business. We're starting to make money from it. We're starting to see change. We're starting to see so much interest, and you know, we can start to create these businesses around the game, and that's at the end ultimately how we're going to professionalize the game and how we're going to make it, you know, sustainable on its own. That being said, I think this pandemic has, you know, taken a hard hit in the women's game, and I'm a little bit worried about its future. I think people need to invest more into the game now. We need to support our female players and clubs and leagues, and not forget about the women's game, because it's like a crucial time right now for the direction that we're going to go in after this pandemic ends. And I hope that, you know, obviously FIFA is committed to the funds that they originally committed. They're promising to continue the $1 billion investment in women's football. UEFA will continue to also fund its women's football programs, but you know, we have to make sure that we don't forget and we don't just cut the women's team or the women's league just because you know, the men's team is struggling. I don't know. I hope, I really have a high hopes for this, and wish that we can get out of it in a positive light, but you never know. This is a really serious situation that's really hit the entire world and our economy. And you know, at the end of the day, sport is so small in this sense, and it's important that everyone's safe and healthy and that. So hopefully we can build it back up to where it was, and then go on beyond that. But yeah, we'll see. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I think, you know, not to harp on it, but something you mentioned before, I've known it because my father's obviously from Europe, so I've been aware of the game out there a bit. But I think culturally too, people don't realize that women are not necessarily encouraged to play sports generally, especially soccer, it being the world sport. And so when you talked about Cyprus, which is not uncommon in other countries, like you literally may play a professional league game against someone who's 16 years old. And that may just be because players that would be 25, like either just stopped playing or they never were encouraged to play. And unfortunately, there's a lot of countries that are not backing the women's game at all. And so anything that exists there is funded individually by people and their passion to kind of help the women's game. I know in Cyprus, it's been positive as of late. Luckily, the men's side has kind of owned up and started to invest on the women's side a bit. But I've talked to a couple Americans about this, and I know from my experience, we always joke, like all these men get drafted and they leave college and everything just gets like a step better. And then for the women, it's kind of like you miss it. You're like, where's my cold bath? Where's my not like 24/7 doctor? You go to wherever in Europe, and like you said, you're living in a hotel. You may get one meal a day, and you're working I was going to be a bouncer when I was in Norway before I left, because I was like, I can't afford to pay for a $45 burger to like eat every night. So I just think that's really important perspective to bring up. And a lot of people don't know that, because, you know, it's easy to write professional athlete on your resume and everyone be like, wow, that's amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
But I hope you're right in terms of the pandemic and people continuing to invest and seeing the game grow. I was a little disappointed to see that they postponed the Euros due to the men. I believe I'm right on that. It's 2022 now. Is that when the Euros will be for women?
Correct. But yeah, so they didn't.
But maybe it's good actually in the end, because who knows where we're going to be next summer with this.
That's true.
But yeah,
also.
right. So
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
no,
thank
for
you.
sure. It's an interesting time right now, and I hope that yeah, we can keep the wave going
Yeah,
toward women's football, but you never know. And it's not glamorous now, but maybe one day it will be.
I have good faith it will be. It's just going to take a lot of patience and time, and thankfully there's women like you that have continually played, and I think that's another thing to mention is oftentimes when you're 20 or 21 and you go into these leagues and you don't know anybody and you're from a different country, wherever that may be in the world, a lot of times your perspective comes from the older players. And I mean, you were only what, like 20, maybe 26 or 27 when I came, and I was 21 maybe, and like
Yeah.
I had never experienced anything like that. And sometimes it's, I hate to say it, but it's humbling. And older players like, no, like this is the reality. This is what it's like. And um, but I think it gives, it pushes younger players to continue to play when you see people that are still doing it and pursuing it and doing it not because they make all this money, but because they have just a real passion for the game. And so kudos to you for continuing to play. I think, especially in Europe, there's a lot of talent that people don't even know exists. And we need to make sure that our 15-year-olds or 16-year-olds are still having the passion to play, and people supporting them through that process. But I really appreciate you coming on. I know you have such a wealth of knowledge. I don't know if I know anyone that has as much experience as you do in Europe playing, and kind of also doing the career stuff and the immersion. So I think this will be really
Oh,
insightful for anybody that can listen. So thank you for coming on.
well, thank you for having me. And I mean, if any of your listeners or you have any more questions, I'm happy to be available for you or
Perfect.
anyone else.